In 1942, deep inside occupied Europe, decisions were made that never appeared in headlines. They were not announced. They were not signed in public. Behind closed doors, representatives of enemy powers spoke in silence. What followed did not end the war, but it quietly changed how it was fought. By 1942, Europe was fully consumed by war. Front lines shifted constantly. Cities were bombed at night. Railways, ports, and factories became targets. Every nation involved was exhausted, yet none could afford to stop. Officially, the conflict allowed no compromise. Publicly, only total victory was acceptable. But behind the front lines, another reality existed. Neutral corridors still functioned. Diplomats traveled under false names. Intelligence officers crossed borders with forged documents. In cities like Bern, Stockholm, Lisbon, and parts of occupied Europe, conversations continued quietly. These were not peace talks. They were something narrower, something more controlled. The war had reached a point where certain actions produced diminishing returns. Bombing campaigns strained resources. Sabotage operations provoked retaliation that harmed civilian populations more than military outcomes. Prisoner exchanges became increasingly complicated. Each side faced problems that could not be solved through force alone. In 1942, informal contacts intensified. They were not authorized by parliaments or announced by governments. They were tolerated, sometimes denied, sometimes deliberately ignored. Military intelligence agencies understood the value of restraint in specific areas. Certain factories were spared while others were destroyed. Some transport routes were disrupted repeatedly. Others remained strangely untouched. This was not coincidence. It was calculation. The initial discussions focused on limited objectives: protection of specific assets, reduction of civilian losses in selected regions, avoidance of escalation in sensitive zones. No trust existed, only necessity. These contacts were conducted through intermediaries: bankers, diplomats from neutral states, Red Cross officials, industrial representatives. Each message was deliberately vague. Language was careful. Commitments were never written clearly. In occupied Europe, rumors circulated. Resistance members noticed patterns. Bombing raids avoided certain facilities. Enemy patrols withdrew at unexpected moments. Some arrests never happened. Others happened quickly and without explanation. Nothing was centralized. No single authority controlled these interactions. They were fragmented, localized, denied if discovered. The war continued openly. Battles raged. Death remained constant. But beneath the visible violence, restraint began to appear in unexpected places. This was the beginning of a silent agreement. Not one deal, but many small understandings. Each one unofficial. Each one fragile. Together, they formed something new. As 1942 progressed, the scope of these quiet understandings expanded. Intelligence agencies on both sides began to recognize patterns. Certain signals were respected. Others were ignored deliberately. When violations occurred, retaliation followed quickly. When restraint was observed, silence followed. This created an unspoken system. Air forces adjusted targeting priorities. Some industrial zones remained operational longer than expected. Rail junctions critical to civilian evacuation were avoided during peak hours. These decisions were never explained publicly. They were justified internally as strategic choices. Behind the scenes, communication channels multiplied. Messages passed through coded phrases. Commercial negotiations concealed political intent. Humanitarian language masked military calculation. Prisoner exchanges became one of the most visible outcomes. They were framed as humanitarian acts. In reality, they served broader purposes. Skilled personnel were returned quietly. Intelligence assets were recovered. Each exchange reinforced the unspoken rules. Resistance movements were affected. Some operations received unexpected tolerance. Others were crushed mercilessly. Leaders struggled to understand why. They were never informed. The agreement was never uniform. It varied by region, by commander, by local circumstance. Some generals respected it. Others rejected it entirely. This inconsistency created tension within military hierarchies. In several cases, planned operations were delayed without explanation. Orders were rewritten. Objectives were changed overnight. Official records later described these changes as logistical issues or weather-related delays. Civilian populations noticed subtle differences. A factory still standing after repeated raids. A port operating under partial blackout but never destroyed. These anomalies were discussed quietly. No one understood their origin. The risk of exposure was constant. Discovery would have meant scandal. Accusations of treason. Collapse of public morale. For this reason, documentation was minimal. Many records were destroyed intentionally. By late 1942, the silent agreement had become self-sustaining. Not because it was strong, but because breaking it created immediate consequences. It did not stop the war. It shaped it. The fragile balance reached its breaking point in late 1942. A major operation was planned. Officially, it followed standard military logic. Unofficially, it violated several unspoken boundaries. Targets previously avoided were included. Timing ignored established patterns. Warnings were sent indirectly. They were ignored. The result was immediate escalation. Retaliatory strikes followed. Areas once spared were destroyed within days. Civilian casualties increased sharply. Prisoner exchanges were suspended. Communication channels went silent. Within intelligence circles, panic spread. The agreement was unraveling. Emergency contacts were reactivated. Intermediaries were summoned. Meetings occurred in secrecy. No records were kept. The objective was not restoration. It was containment. Concessions were made. Operations were canceled quietly. Commanders were reassigned. Official explanations cited unrelated reasons. The agreement survived. Barely. But it changed. After this point, restraint became narrower. More selective. Trust diminished further. The understanding no longer aimed to reduce suffering. It aimed only to prevent uncontrollable escalation. The war continued into its most destructive phase. New fronts opened. Resources depleted rapidly. The silent agreement faded into the background. By the end of 1942, its influence was minimal. It had altered certain outcomes. Saved specific lives. Preserved selected locations. It left no monument. No treaty. No official acknowledgment. The war did not pause to acknowledge what had happened. In 1943, attention shifted elsewhere. New offensives. New fronts. New priorities. The quiet arrangements of 1942 no longer mattered. Those who had carried messages returned to ordinary roles. Diplomats resumed formal language. Intelligence officers were reassigned. Intermediaries disappeared into civilian life. No announcement marked the end. There was no final meeting. No closing words. The channels simply went silent. In official archives, the year closed without explanation. Operations were listed. Battles were recorded. Losses were counted. What was missing went unnoticed. Certain factories remained standing longer than expected. Some rail lines were repaired quickly. Specific air raids never came. These details appeared minor. They were never connected. People who had witnessed fragments of the agreement kept quiet. Some believed silence was protection. Others assumed no one would listen. Many were instructed to forget. Files were reduced. Notes destroyed. Drafts never finalized. When post-war investigations began, attention focused elsewhere. War crimes. Major treaties. Clear decisions with visible signatures. The quiet understandings of 1942 did not qualify. They had no authors. No formal approval. No traceable chain of command. Historians searching decades later found gaps. Moments where logic faltered. Patterns without explanation. A bombing plan canceled without reason. A convoy spared despite exposure. A prisoner exchange approved unusually fast. Each anomaly alone meant nothing. Together, they suggested restraint. But suggestion was not proof. Those involved were gone. Some died during the war. Others lived long lives without speaking. A few tried to explain fragments late in life. Their words were dismissed as speculation. No document confirmed them. Public memory moved on. Monuments were built elsewhere. Names were carved for other events. This story did not fit commemoration. It lacked heroism. It lacked clarity. It lacked a conclusion. The agreement did not end suffering. It did not stop destruction. It did not change the final outcome of the war. It only altered paths briefly. Quietly. Selectively. In some cities, buildings survived that should not have. In others, destruction came suddenly after long restraint. Civilians noticed only in hindsight. At the time, survival felt random. After the war, reconstruction erased traces. Streets were rebuilt. Factories modernized. Archives reorganized. Silence hardened into absence. By the time historians asked the right questions, witnesses were gone. Records were incomplete. Official narratives had solidified. There was no place for an unofficial war within the official one. The agreement left no name because naming it would have required acknowledgment. Acknowledgment would have raised questions. Questions would have demanded responsibility. So it remained unnamed. The war became history. The agreement became omission. In textbooks, 1942 is remembered for battles. For turning points. For escalation. Not for restraint. Not for quiet decisions made to limit damage without ending conflict. Not for men who spoke softly in neutral rooms while armies advanced elsewhere. Their actions left no photographs. No transcripts. No signatures. Only effects that could not be traced. As time passed, even those effects faded. Later bombings erased earlier restraint. Later deaths overshadowed earlier survival. What remained was a cleaner story. Easier to explain. Easier to teach. The quiet agreement disrupted that clarity. So it disappeared. Today, it exists only between lines. Between reports. Between statistics. It survives in silence. And silence does not argue. If this story mattered to you, consider subscribing. More forgotten history is coming.